it's Lindsey from Two Main Friends in a Podcast. We're kicking off with our first giveaway. To enter, comment favorite on the episode you enjoyed most on Spotify or text us on Apple Podcasts. We can't wait to hear what you love. Do you remember this summer when we went to the beach?
Yes.
And we got your boys the
boogie boards?
The boogie boards.
They were so pumped for those.
We were getting ready to leave, actually. And then you found them on sale. And then we had to stay like another hour so that they could practice with their boogie boards.
Yeah, but it was great though because we weren't expecting the tide to be in. And when we came back from shopping and looking around, the tide was in and it had cooled off and it was just like a great moment. Yeah,
it was a great end to the day, and your oldest was so excited to get out on the boogie board, and so he was catching the waves, and I was standing next to him, and I encouraged him to stand up and turn around. Not stand up, no, just turn around and ride the wave. That's what it was. I encouraged him just to turn around, ride the wave, and enjoy it, and the wave was big, bigger than I thought. And the poor kid toppled underneath the water and it frightened him. He had fear and untrust.
I remember that well because I was helping my youngest and we did the same thing. And then the wave came in, but then it knocked me down and I was on my hands and knees. And then the waves just kept coming and I couldn't stand up because I was laughing so hard that there was no way it was happening. And then everybody else started laughing and
I was so thankful that it knocked you down twice, though, because your oldest son he was instantly distracted by he was scared.
Yeah.
So he was instantly distracted by his fear and seeing, oh, it's not that bad. Mom keeps getting knocked down, too.
Great. Learning lessons all around.
But it just made me think of, as we were prepping for this episode on encouragement, about how sometimes there's bad encouragement or you encourage somebody and you don't expect the way it's going to turn out. And that was one of those instances.
That's fair. Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah. But I learned a lesson in that moment too, that I wasn't the person to blame. I didn't know the wave was going to do that to him, right?
Right.
But I instantly felt bad. It was like, oh, your son's going to hate me for forever.
Right. And it wasn't that at all. Like, it's a great memory. And we were honestly just talking about that in the car the other day. And both of my boys were like, Mom, remember that time where like you fell over and like you couldn't get up? And I was like, yes, because I was laughing so hard. So it's a great memory all around. They don't have any, at least that they've not expressed any fears from anything. We'll see how this summer goes when we get to use the boogie boards all summer long.
And they say, don't ask Lindsey to come. That will be the true tell sign that they don't trust.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
But in the true spirit of encouragement and encouraging one another, I think the definition is a really good reminder of what encouragement means, because I think that's a very broad word. We can use it in so many ways. But an encourager is a person who inspires others to do something by giving them confidence or courage or providing approval or help.
Wow.
So in that, when I think back to the ocean incident, my encouragement for him was helping him to get more comfortable and doing it. And in that, yes, he did fall over, but he got right back up and kept going and was having a blast at the same time. And so I think encouragement is just helping somebody build confidence. And even whenever you fall off your boogie board and the wave takes you over, you get back up again and you keep going and you keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think back to my early days starting out in ministry, how important it was that I was working with pastors that were willing to help me find that confidence. And they were very intentional about that and saying like, you can do this and we value what you're doing and giving me opportunities to not only try, but to try and fail. And they weren't there to like point a finger at me. They were like, okay, so figure it out. Like, what are you going to do different next time? And I'm so thankful for that framework that they gave me, because now I can look at situations like that and say, okay, it's not this event failed or this thing failed. It's what can we do better next time and learn from it rather than sit there and be upset that it didn't go the way we planned.
Yeah. I remember in the career that I'm in now, in the position that I'm in now, I was transitioning from being more of a behind the scenes employee, doing a lot of the orientations and things like that. And I remember the president of our company came and she had offered me a promotion into being what we called at the time a staffing supervisor, which was basically just a recruiter who did a little bit of supervising as well. And that position was going to be on site, handling multitudes of employees at a time. And I just did not feel comfortable doing it at first. I thought I'm too shy, I'm too quiet, like having to coach and counsel people. I don't know if that's really what I want to do. And so she was sitting in my office with me and she offered it to me. And I said, no, I don't think that that's for me. And I was going on vacation the following week. And she said, okay, well, I'm not going to take that answer. So when you go on vacation, I want you to really think about this and come back to me with your answer.
Wow.
And so I went on vacation and that in my head was, well, that is her way of saying, you probably should say yes to this. It's a really good opportunity. I never took it as you better say yes or you don't have a job.
Sure.
I don't think that would have been the case at all. But I took it as, well, she believes in me. So maybe with her as a mentor and an encourager, like maybe I can grow into this role more. And so that is that example of encouragement that it didn't look like your normal encouragement, right? It kind of was one-sided, but in the end, it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I made by saying yes to that. And I'm really glad that she pushed me more in that direction to do that.
Yeah, I can think back to a different job that I had just a handful of years ago. I was working in an office for a pretty large company. And within my first week of starting there, it was an office job. I was just overseeing the office, taking calls, fielding the mail, upkeeping with different things, pretty easy stuff. But the president of the company came in within like I said, like a week of me getting hired and just said, hey, we're so glad to have you as part of the team. I just want to let you know, whatever you need to make your job happen or whatever you need to do it well, you have my permission to do all of that. And when he said that to me, it gave me ownership of my position. I knew I could do those things on my own. I'd worked in offices before, but him saying that to me gave me the permission to be like, oh, so I can, organize it the way I need to, or order the supplies that I need, or whatever that played out to be. And that was so empowering to me. I didn't know that I needed to hear it. I was going to do my best regardless of what he said to me, but having that backing of him saying, I support you in this role. I'm so glad you're here. Let me just know you can do what you need to do. And that was so encouraging to me. And I owned my position in that role and I loved that job. It was a great time that I had at that company. And I'll just always remember that moment of what that encouragement said, and that from him saying, this is all you can do this.
And I think that sometimes we limit those moments to leaders or mentors in our lives, and we need that, of course. But I think as friends, we can offer that same support to one another, to stand beside them and encourage them and lead them through those sort of things too. In my 20s, one of my favorite scriptures when I was in master's commission, and I've explained this before, but if you're new, it's like a Bible college essentially, and you go through this program and you're really dedicated to reading the word, memorizing the scripture, and learning what God's will for your life is. And so that was a huge part of what I was doing at the time. And one of the scriptures that really stood out to me was in Exodus 17, verses 11 through 13. It says, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hand grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and one on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. And so I know whenever you read that right out, it's kind of like, well, what does that have to do with friendship, right?
What's going on? Why is there a man sitting down and two guys holding up his arms? And who's Joshua and what's happening with him?
Right. So they were in a battle. And any time that Moses' hands were up, they were winning the battle. But the moment that he got tired and his hands went down, he started to lose the battle. And that was kind of the agreement, if you will, that they had, right? And so there's just some very key moments in that are super important, I think, in friendship, is that when Moses' arms become too tired to hold up, Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. So they met the need that was simple for him, and they had him sit on the stone. But what I think an encouragement is that Aaron and Hur stood on either side of Moses and held up his hands until the sun went down. So they never took away his position. in what he was doing. They just assisted him in his position. And one of the things that I found when I was kind of looking this up again was that they had faith in Moses, and they didn't try to take over Moses's role, but instead helped him by holding up his arms. So when our friends are going through something and maybe they're looking for a new job and they're feeling weary or they're feeling exhausted about it, you can't take over that position for them because you can't physically look for a new job for them. Or, I mean, I guess you could put their resume on Indeed if you want to, but you can't do the work for them.
Right.
In that sense.
Yeah.
But you can stand on either side of them and support them. And maybe that looks like, hey, I have this friend that works with this company ABC and you could do this. Maybe your friend is going through a very hard time in their personal life and you can't take that position for them. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one and you can't take the grieving and the hurt with them, but you can sit with them and you can encourage them and love on them to help them get through that grieving stage and just be there for them. Maybe you've walked through a similar instance and you can provide that comfort that they're seeking, whatever the case is. Sometimes it's just sitting with them.
So often it is just sitting, and practically sometimes it looks like bringing over a meal, right? Like if you're sitting in grief or you're overwhelmed by a situation, having someone bring a meal to you is so encouraging because you don't have to think about what you're having for dinner. And sometimes you don't even have the capacity to even want to eat dinner, right? But having that person show up with the meal and is like, here, I brought this for you is. And I've had that happen in my own life. In 2017, my husband and I, we walked through a miscarriage and it was really hard. And we had never experienced anything like that. Nobody in my immediate family had ever experienced anything like that. And it was very hard. But we had an amazing group of friends at the time that set up meals for us. They shared their stories with us. I learned through that process how many women I knew that had also walked through miscarriage. And I had no idea because it wasn't a part of the conversation. And suddenly, because we're walking through it, it allowed them to share their story. And that was what got me through those really hard days when I didn't know that I wanted to get up the next day, right? And hearing the stories of all of these other people that have walked through it, come out on the other side, gave me the strength and the courage to be like, okay, today's just the next day. We're going to make it. And sometimes we don't realize how those simple things like showing up with a hot meal or having dinner provided by delivery even, like it doesn't have to be fancy, but just that practical way of, hey, I'm thinking about you. I care about you. I know that this is hard, but we're going to make it, speaks volumes. And you carry that with you for years to come because it's been 7-8 years now. And I still carry those moments with me deeply in my heart.
And we just talked about in a few episodes back examples of friendship and what an amazing example of encouraging someone through their grief and walking through someone with their grief. I can remember a time when I was living in New Hampshire, going through that master's program. You go through a lot of just warfare whenever you're kind of isolating yourselves for a purpose and doing something that way. And I was walking through a very hard and very dark season of my life. It was my third year of being in this program, and it's almost like a spiritual detox. Yeah. You're just walking through a lot of stuff and dealing with a lot of stuff. You're constantly presented with who you are as a person, and you're doing a lot of work, a lot of inner work. And so some pretty nasty things had started to surface up in my life. And my roommate at the time, I tell her all the time that she's a saint because she dealt with me through this. We had lived together with 4 other girls, and then we did a rearrangement during that time. And she and I ended up being placed at a different home living together. So we lived in home openers' homes where they would open their homes to us, and we shared a room. And so now we're in these confined spaces. And so she was seeing the behind the scenes that no one else was seeing. She was seeing the ugly branches that needed a lot of pruning. Yeah. And I remember one day she just blatantly looked at me and said, if you don't go to leadership about this, I am absolutely going to do it for you. And in that instance, we talked about sometimes you don't put yourself in the position because you can't do it for them. But there are times that you may need to actually physically put yourself in the position to do it for them. And because if they're not going to do it, and you can only encourage them so far, but you see that this is going to either make it or break it for them, you put yourself in the position to do it. And that's what she said she was going to do. And I believed her. And I remember the day that she said it, I remember we were downstairs and I remember it like it was yesterday. And if you know me, I have a terrible memory. But we were downstairs and we had made chicken nuggets, and I was dipping my chicken nuggets in honey, crying over them. And the next day we went to leadership to the wife, and I sat down with her and I told her everything. And my roommate, my friend, she stood, I could see her like a peripheral, like outside of the room. She was standing there waiting because she was going to make sure that if I didn't, she would. And she stood in that gap. And I tell her constantly, like, if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for that moment, I don't know where I would be today, because that was such a significant moment in my life that it was a make it or break it for me.
Yeah. And what a great example of the scripture that you read with Moses and Aaron and her, and lifting up your hands, right? Sometimes we need an outside perspective to push us into that right direction. And not often do we have that. And so when you do, that's such a treasure, because we need it. We need people to speak into our life and say, hey, you're out of line here. Or maybe you're not out of line, but you're not going in the right direction. And I'm just so grateful that you had that moment, because it's important and we all need that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that it definitely was a significant, I want to be a voice of encouragement into the people and the relationships that I have when they're feeling down, or when they're maybe not, presenting as their best self. Well, why? What is the core? Because when we are in those dark seasons, there's always a core. What are we participating in? What are we doing that is causing us to go down these pathways that maybe aren't the healthiest or the best pathway for us? And as friends, I think it's important to say, hey, I've started to see these behaviors or these tendencies start to surface. How can I help you? Like, what's happening in the shift? And sometimes it's just that we're changing, and maybe those tendencies aren't necessarily bad, but we need to have that scale to be able to weigh it on, well, why am I doing it this way? And what can I do differently?
Yeah. And I think having people to ask those questions and us be willing to respond to them, and know that that's coming from a good place. Because if people are reaching out to ask us those questions in our lives, they're doing it because they're concerned and they love us enough to say, hey, I don't want you to go down this path. Like, I see it, but I don't want you to participate in that. That's not good for you. And that's love. That's love in action. Because if we love someone enough to say, hey, don't do that, it's not because we're judging someone or we're trying to, stop them from having fun or whatever it looks like. We're doing it because we want what's best for the other person. And that's hard, because it couldn't be that it's not received well. It could be that maybe they decide to do the opposite thing anyway, but we've tried our best and we've said the things. But sometimes it can be that that's a turning point for somebody. And I want to be able to be a person that does those things out of love and says, hey, what is this? And what's going on? Can I help you? Are you like, what can I do to help you through this? Because we need people to champion us when we're going in the right direction, but we also need people to pick us up when we've fallen and we need to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's a responsibility on both sides, right? If you're the person that's encouraging someone, you really need to check yourself and check your heart and the reason behind saying it, because you're going to go speak to someone, and that can be a very pressing time, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're saying it out of love and you're not saying it out of judgment. So you have to be super careful how you present what you're going to say to that person. But if you are the person that someone is coming to with that as well, your first response or reaction shouldn't be defensive. You, as the person they're coming to, need to take a step back maybe and weigh what they're saying and see how it really does apply to your life. Because not every time that somebody comes to you is always going to be right, because they're seeing it from their point of view and their perspective as well. And maybe there are simple truths that are in there and you need to really like reflect on those things. But I think that it's a great responsibility on both ends to make sure that you're weighing what you say, you're weighing how you receive it and how you apply it to your life on a larger scale of things. Like, I think that it is very possible to say, this is so small and minuscule in it, but I don't like the color pink on you. Well, I don't care if you like the color pink on me. You know what I mean? But I do think that if you are the person that is the encourager, you should be very careful with what you're bringing to the person and really make sure that you've weighed it and know that what you're coming with is going to be a positive encouragement and not going to tear them down in a sense. And then you as the person receiving it needs to make sure that you're weighing what they're saying and not become defensive.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's really important. I was just thinking about the verse that we were reading and how there were 2 men who helped Moses through that. And who are the people in our lives that could be that for us? It doesn't have to be 2 people, but do you have somebody in your life that can hold up your hands when you are so tired and so overwhelmed and so discouraged that they can remind you of the truth and remind you that this isn't going to be forever, that this is just a part of life. This is just a battle that we're facing, but we're going to get to the other side. And that's not going to be everybody. That's not meant to be everybody. But are you surrounding yourself with people? And I know that we've touched on this before, but it comes back to being said again, right? Like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Because the people that you lean on during hard times are valuable and necessary. And so who do you have in your life that can speak those truths into your life and you can receive them? Because it would be weird if, you have a college friend from, 12, 15 years ago show up and be like, hey, I just think, by the way, you're doing all these things wrong. Like, you wouldn't receive that well because you haven't done life with them for 15 years. So who are they to say you're doing all these things wrong? But someone that you're doing life with and you're sharing things with and you're meeting up regularly and they know the ins and outs of your life, that makes more sense. And I think it's important that we have those relationships in our lives.
Yeah. I think sometimes those relationships can even look like you're walking through a hard time and you don't know how to put a finger on it or say what exactly it is that you're walking through. You just feel ick. You feel distant from yourself. You feel like, I just want to lay in bed all day and I don't know what's going on and why is my brain like this? And I just feel like I'm walking through a cloud all the time. Sometimes when we're walking through those things, I would dare to say most times, it's just nice to have that person that's close to you to remind you of who you are, and speak those truths to you. You are this, you are strong, you are brave, you are courageous, you have overcome so much, or whatever those encouragements are, that you've invested in each other. So you know that that's what that person needs to hear in that moment. Yeah.
And those are the moments that can sometimes pull you out of those funks that feel gross. And I just think that it's important that we have people in our lives that we can lean on for those things, and also be that for other people. Be the encourager, be the one that can share the truth and not be afraid of it, and be the one to call out the things that we're seeing that aren't okay and not be afraid of that, and know that it's coming from a place of love and we want what's best for you, and try to grow in those areas so that our friendships can be more well-rounded and not just surface. Because when you get past the surface and you get underneath, that's where there's
depth there. Yeah, depth and growth for sure. That's a wrap on this episode of Two Main Friends in a Podcast. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can also send us an email at twomainfriends@gmail.com. And as always, leave us a review wherever you're listening.